we'll move on. We have, I think Taras is going to do a draw, wherever Taras has gone. We're going to have a prize draw for that, and we're going to give you some trainers in just one moment. Thank you for joining us. Hope you had a good lunch today and this afternoon. We're going to have an immense panel discussion with Daniela Doherty and Raj Koneru, CEO of Core AI. And we're going to be talking all about how Florida Blue has implemented a visual IVR and all the lessons learned there. Anybody involved in health insurance in the room? Yes? Cool. Couple of Florida Blue people. Cool. We'll do that. We'll come back to the draw, and we'll do the draw in just one moment. What have I done with that clicker? I don't want to move that slide on somehow.
I'm wondering if people didn't know that it's back here.
Maybe. That's not it. Yeah, go on. Taras can be the clicker. Cool. Nice, let's do it. So, thank you for joining us, Raj. Thank you, Daniela. Appreciate it. No problem. So maybe we should set some context. Raj, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Core AI?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Raj Koneru. I'm the founder and CEO of Core.ai. We're a conversational AI platform company. We provide platforms and solutions that enable large enterprises to deploy conversational AI, both for customer-facing use cases and employee-facing use cases. I mean, to be able to automate as many of those interactions as possible, improve the experience, and reduce cost overall.
Fantastic. And recently, at the start, was it start of the year, Gartner Magic Quadrant?
The what?
Gartner Magic Quadrant leader, yeah?
Yes. So we were lucky to be placed where we were placed in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, thanks to customers like Daniela believing in us.
Fantastic. And the Gartner Magic Quadrant, for those of you who haven't seen it, essentially what Gartner did is there's somewhere in the region of 2,000 conversational AI technology vendors, and Gartner went out into the market and they said, okay, well, what kind of stuff is important when it comes to enterprise automation? And they filtered that 2,000 down to, I think it ended up being something like 20 in the end. And there was a small handful that were in the leader quadrant, Core AI being one of them. And it's been doing some amazing stuff, amazing work. So yeah, thank you for joining us. And Daniela, tell us about yourself and Florida Blue, what you do at Florida Blue.
So I've been at Florida Blue about 3 years, started as a consultant, and this was going to be my second career. I had retired from the financial industry and got to join a really cool group of people that are really focused on driving technology to give our members more services that they can handle on their own. Self-service. We wanted to increase self-service. We wanted to make sure that the satisfaction of what we put out there was always a heavy focus. And there's just so much opportunity because now we are excited about what we are evolving. Smart IVR, we call it, our visual IVR, is kind of the first thing that we started with Core. And what we wanted to do was give an opportunity for customers when they call us to leverage cell phones. We have over 85% of the world has a cell phone, right? So the smart devices are available, and that's a channel that we should expand upon so that customers can use the services a little more easily.
Fantastic. And so the use case we're going to talk about today is a visual IVR use case. And I think it was Frank, the first speaker from earlier on today, mentioned that visual IVRs were kind of spoke about a lot a while back, maybe I think you mentioned something like 10 years ago, but technology really wasn't there to be able to make it happen, whereas now, because the technology's gotten better, and I suppose customer behavior has gotten more sophisticated. We all talk to Siri every day and Alexa and stuff like that. We're a bit more skilled in how to interact using our voice and stuff like that with technology. Raj, what are you seeing as far as the kind of wider trends around conversational AI, things like multimodal, things like visual IVR? Are you seeing those kind of things becoming more prevalent?
Yeah, I think the technologies are there today. You have different types of NLP engines. You have dialogue management engines, orchestration engines. Companies like us provide all of those things. But I think what all that does is enable companies like Florida Blue to reimagine those experiences. And each use case can be delivered with a different experience Some could be just purely conversational. Some could be just in voice or just in chat. But then the combination, is very, very, very powerful. So the medical ID card use case that we implemented at Florida Blue, is actual value to a member. I go to a doctor's office, I don't have my medical card. It's so easy for me to make a phone call, get it, instantly, and be able to move forward with my appointment, essentially. We've seen the similar use cases where people want to change their address. Now, when you're speaking to an ASR engine, the ASR engine is most probably going to get your address wrong, essentially. So again, that's a great use case for visual IVR. In addition to that, explanation of benefits. You have a long bill, and there's items in that bill, and you have questions. It's easier to send the bill and be able to point to things on the bill, that you want to explain through your smart IVR. So we're seeing now that the technologies are better understood and appreciated and relied upon by large enterprises, we're seeing the people who are getting the maximum value are the ones that can reimagine these experiences, to provide something like Apple-ish, if you will.
Apple-ish, that's a good one. So Daniela, tell us a little bit about that use case then. Can you explain a little bit of background and what it involves and what it actually is?
So I'll explain what we had before we went to the smart visual IVR. So our customers would call the call center, number at the back, back of their card on their statement because they don't have their card, assuming, and they say, I want to have an ID card, okay? Our IVR, traditional IVR, can do that. We can, and the IVR would say, yes, no problem, Ms. Kennedy, I'll go ahead and mail it to your address that we have on file. You should receive it in 7 days, in 7 business days. Well, typically in a customer's mind, 7 days, 3 days later, it feels like it's been 2 weeks, right? They typically will call back. I haven't received my card yet. Well, we did send it out. It'll take some time to get in the mail. Well, in this now, we've offered an opportunity for members. They could also go, online and ask for the information on their card, but they're on the phone, right? We have them on the phone. They now have a cell phone. We say, would you like to get a digital copy of your ID card? Customers say yes. They now get an image of their ID card. They have it in their phone, they can save it, and they can go to the doctor with that phone immediately. And we found that customers really like that option a great deal. We started with that business case, we started with that user case because we wanted to test the technology and see if customers wanted to use it. So that was the first thing we did middle of last year. That went really well. And then we started adding other features. We add the payment features, and then we add, changing your primary care physician on file. Those are all things that we're starting to put into this application that allows customers to have the information in their hand and avoid having to go to an advocate. So from a business perspective, it really frees up our advocates to do what we want them to do, to handle the complex items that members need to talk to an advocate, especially in healthcare. It's a serious topic, right? If they're calling, they may be calling about something pretty significant in their life that they want to speak to a human about because it's that intense. And I'd rather have our advocates talk to folks about that than have to mail out an ID card. So that's what we have done with the technology. It's really helped us a great deal. We also now are leveraging, we just recently, this was in August, end of August or September? September. Now we have moved to the core chatbot on our website. So aligning and copying stuff that we've already done, technology that we've used, any tweaks necessary because it's the online version, but now the consistency across the places customers are calling to get self-service, we have it there.
Is it the same use case on the chat that it is?
There is. We've already have same use case. It's starting with ID card, and then we're going to progress.
Now it's on the web.
Yep.
Nice. And what were the kind of, I suppose, you mentioned what the before situation was like. What was it that led you to want to do it in the first place? Was it because it wasn't an ideal customer experience? Were there other kind of business drivers at play that had you initially investigate doing this stuff?
It's really about where the world is evolving to, right? You think about the member, the millennials, right? Think about just how many times do people want to speak to an advocate? Times are changing, and we didn't have enough features that were self-serviceable in an easy, acceptable way, being honest, right? And reality is, in the old way, it was like we almost encouraged customers to call us for anything you need. Well, that's not sustainable, and quite frankly, we are in a world today, I don't know how many hands, how many people want to speak to a service advocate versus solving it on your own, right? That's the reality of life. So we really wanted to start exploring what are those things that we can do for Florida Blue to give our members those extra channels for them to self-service.
Are you seeing that, Raj, with other clients? Is it the kind of drive to be more Apple-ish, to use that phrase, or is there other things that you're noticing people are doing this because of?
I mean, there's the broader theme of digital transformation, right? You know, every company wants to be an Uber, right? You know, completely contactless, you know, it's a business that runs digitally completely. So when it comes to the touch points with the customer, most of the enterprises realize that is a representation of their brand. You know, we like the Apple brand because of the ease of use, basically, and that's why we call it Apple-ish, right? So when you step back, yes, the enterprises want to give self-service to the consumers, not force the consumer to talk to an advocate or an agent, you know, for simple stuff. Those are some of the tactical things, but when you step back and look at it, that experience that the enterprise is delivering, making it easy for the customer or the member, the provider, or whoever the end user is, you know, bleeds over into the feeling that the consumer has about the brand, essentially. And that creates affinity, that creates loyalty, that creates promotion of that brand. So at the end of the day, these experiences deliver extraordinary outcomes. You know, so the technology, the idea, the delivery of that idea in a beautiful way, you know, delivers an extraordinary experience with which you get extraordinary outcomes. And that's what CEOs are seeing. That's what digital transformation is all about. And we're seeing that across the board, basically. So it's not that the brand is now owned only by marketing, basically, the focus of the brand. The brand is now owned by customer service. The brand is owned by everybody who touches the customer from a sales, you know, and a post-sales situation.
Well, we heard from Brian Jefferson from Landry's. He views his contact center as a revenue generator rather than a cost center, and so you have to be investing in customer experience if you want to, you know, be driving revenue. Daniela, how did you approach implementing something like this? You've got a situation now where you're saying, look, this process we have for this use case is not great. We want to be more kind of customer centric. We want to do something that's easier. We want to kind of invest in really improving that customer experience. What steps did you take, and what led you to Core AI?
First, we put together a very large team that represented, you know, the technology team, the digital team, the business, the contact centers. We had representation across the board, and we interviewed a great many vendors in this space. Okay, we started with, I think it was over 11 at one point, got it down to 9. Then we RFP'd with only 4, and then from the 4, we narrowed it down to even further. And then we had the last 2 actually do a proof of technology, proof of concept.
Nice.
Because it was so important that we can hit the ground running. So we wanted to do this and implement it as quickly as possible, understanding the nuances of our business and some of the challenges that we had. You know, not 100% cloud, starting on-premise. Eventually, you know, we're going to move more and more to cloud. But at the condition we were in, not everybody's ready to deal with somebody who's maybe hybrid, right? And Core was. And then the partnership was, you know, critical. So once we did, you know, select Core as our partner, we really work together a great deal. I always tell the story to people. It's interesting because one time with all, pandemic, nobody sees each other face to face. We all talk on video or just audio. And our first meeting that we had, we brought your team together and our team together. People were walking in the door, and there were a few of his folks that I thought were our folks, right? Because that's the way you work as a partnership to evolve these things, right? And making sure that you have the right people at the table talking about how to make this transition, this integration, and what is the customer experience. If the passion about the customer experience isn't in every single person around that table, they needed to be out.
And it's interesting how you went through quite a process to narrow down, the providers that you were looking for. Obviously, Raj, you and your team have been involved in a tremendous amount of these kind of processes. What would your advice be to somebody who would be in a similar position to what Daniela was? And I think it'd be interesting to get your response as well, Daniela, to how to approach that process, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so how does somebody who doesn't really understand the technology, how do they go about actually effectively selecting? Say again?
But, look, the reality is that the space is new. When you think about the technology, IT folks have been used to UI-based computing all their lives, right? It started with the green terminal, mainframe terminals, to Windows, to web, to mobile, and everything had a screen. For the first time, IT is being challenged to deliver an experience just with language. And that's new. That's new to the business. That's new to IT. So educating the customer from a vendor perspective is job number one, basically. Then comes the partnership, then comes the support, then comes everything else. So if I were an enterprise, I would try to pick a vendor who educates me, who gives me the information, of course answers my questions, and can show me, the technology in action, and give me the technology to let me play with it. A lot of times, vendors provide managed services, so they do it for you, and then you don't own anything, you're dependent on them. I think the technology in this case has come to a point where, it's like any other software. You can touch it, feel it, configure it, customize it, use it. So I would look for those things when I'm looking for a vendor. From a vendor perspective, we don't want to keep doing POCs in every single situation, basically because it just takes too much time and effort for everybody involved, both the customer and us. So being able to give them proof points, with enough detail is our challenge, basically to convince them.
Was there anything in particular, had you worked in conversational AI beforehand, Daniela? Did you have an idea about the kind of things you were looking for before that?
Had an idea, yes. Had compared and been a customer of those that are using the technology, yes. But having to actually work the project with a team that was relatively new for me as well on the Florida Blue side. And the challenge is because everybody, all of you vendors will say, out of the box, you can be up in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Okay, everybody says that. Reality is, if it was just up to you, maybe yes, but there is integration that has to happen and all of that technology that then has to meet. So I think that, your question about ask the vendor tons of questions, kick the tires, look under the hood, ask for use cases, give me proof of the people that you've worked with and what you've done, and then make sure that you're not just the business side of the house, it's just the digital side, but make sure the technology folks are in there because they're the ones that then have to make it come to reality. And if they're not clear on what has to happen, it'll fail. So it really is, I know that you just mentioned, POCs, of course, it's costly for everybody, but it is right now, especially on a new technology, it's the ultimate proof.
It's true.
Right?
It's true, absolutely. I think getting people comfortable with the technology is a very important thing. And there are various ways to try to cut down the time and effort in it. You could do it in a quick workshop method which we promote quite a bit. We'll bring a team, you bring your team, business, IT, everybody. Let's lock ourselves in a room for a day or two, and then we'll show you everything we have. You can touch and feel it. We can build something together. And those kinds of ideas are being acceptable right now.
How was the process of implementing it then? You've gone through this selection process. You've identified Core AI. What was the process from that moment on? What happened? What was involved?
Get it done. I mean, what do you mean? Once we've decided on core, then it was a question of, all right, we've already started working together. We know what we want to do. Here's the first use case. Let's look at a timeline and just get that project plan going and start making it happen. And it was really important because you always have to convince the powers that be that offer the funding to do all this stuff, right? That it is worth it. And again, method to the madness of saying, let's start with this specific, use case. It helped us prove that there's value in it. And not only about how many, because there's a lot of savings in that. Let's face it. Operationally, there's a lot of savings, but the customer satisfaction was the biggest selling point. We did a thumbs up, thumbs down after everybody that used this, and we were in the 90s of satisfaction scores, which is fantastic, right? So you've got to make sure that you have measurable proof that it works. Make sure it's understood that it works, because that's how then it can continue to evolve into, other use cases, other funding for additional work that we may want to do.
And what was required? I'm assuming that you lent heavily on the Core AI team for the implementation and the design and things like that. What was required of your team? You mentioned earlier on you had to get a big team, technology, all these other kind of people involved. What was required on your side for others who are kind of wanted to do something similar?
And because we were, we're still premise-based, there was a lot more work on the technology side than you would have had if it was just cloud-based. It would have been heavier on core only. It was a true partnership. I'd say it was 50% of the work, right? On the side.
The IT team at Florida Blue was heavily involved. They came up to speed. They did 50% of the work. So, and that's what normally happens, right? Our platform is new to the customer. They don't know how it works initially. So we get more involved in the beginning, and over time they get comfortable. I mean, there's another customer here at the conference. I mean, last night he was telling me, the customer was telling me, he has 140 people, in his team now building stuff, and they do it all themselves. And we are just support them. And after a year or so. So once they come up to speed, we love that, because then customers can innovate on their own and rely on us for support and give us feature requests and help us define our roadmap, basically. And that's a good partnership.
Nice. So what stage are you at now then, Daniela? Is it like Raj was suggesting there, that you and your team have got, I suppose, more ownership and control and management of the situation?
Yeah. We have a plan together. We are producing more and more features. An agile team that's constantly focused on trying to drive more and more features. We release, as often as we can. We already have our 2023 roadmap to finish some more features. And then we can't wait to get past what's in our backlog, because we're continuing to grow the backlog of other things that we can do. So it's pretty exciting, because we got it now. We're becoming experts at it, and we are moving much faster and getting more and more features into our application.
Nice. And you mentioned earlier on that the idea was to kind of like improve the customer experience and turn what was, a kind of like a more traditional kind of service into something more contemporary. And the thumbs up, thumbs down thing in terms of, seeing that it's working. Is there anything else that you're using to measure the impact that it's having?
How many customers are being self-serviced versus wanting to go speak to an advocate? If the feature is understandable, simple, to the point, and gives the customer the answers they want, they don't need to speak to an advocate. So trying to drive up the self-service containment is a measure that we look at very, very carefully to see if there's value there, right? Because, satisfaction, number one, containment, number two, and quite frankly, if customers aren't containing because they're not satisfied with then we listen carefully, get the feedback, and make tweaks along the way. We've already done tweaks many times, already on the features that we put out there, because we're constantly evaluating how the customers are seeing it and what the end results are.
Any other things you'd recommend, Raj, in terms of measuring the impact of this? It seems as though now what's nice is that, like 5 years ago, a lot of these kind of applications were kind of, I suppose, a little bit more or a little bit less transactional. They weren't really doing transactions. There's a lot of FAQ stuff, a lot of light touch kind of stuff. And then the measuring success is quite difficult, and you kind of rely on more technical measures around like the NLU, confidence scores, and all this kind of stuff. Whereas now, because businesses are actually doing things like this, processing requests for digital ID cards and others, it's getting a lot more transactional, and so the metrics become more about what's the value to the business. Anything you can share in terms of how either Florida Blue or other clients are kind of measuring the impact that this stuff has had beyond what Daniela's mentioned?
I mean, there are more detailed metrics like NLP, success rates, drop-off rates, all those kinds of things. But I think the most important ones are the ones that, Daniela talked about, which is customer satisfaction. Can we measure it? Can we see it improve? Which use case they use more versus others, basically, and at what point during the dialogue do they drop off to an agent? Where is the frustration point? And associated with that is, are we being empathetic to their needs? Can we measure the sentiment of the customer? The customer could be speaking to the virtual assistant, could be very angry, but still be contained. But you don't want an angry customer. So the sentiment, measuring that is useful, basically. And of course, the containment at the end of the day is hard dollars. That's why we get the funding for the projects, to begin with. We're starting to see some of our customers now come up with ideas to upsell or cross-sell additional things. So like you said, it can be a revenue-generating opportunity, or it could be an additional cost-cutting opportunity. Like somebody calls in to pay their bill, you ask them, do you want to receive digital statements and stop receiving paper statements, for example. That's an additional cost saving. But it's in the context of that conversation. So I think that's the next phase. We went from just FAQs to inquiries, what's my balance, what kind of stuff, to transactional, I want to do something, to now the brand or the enterprise is now recognizing they already know who you are. In most cases, they know what you're talking about right now. Now they can suggest things to you. So the virtual assistant becomes a recommendation engine at the end of the day.
Nice. Very good, very good. I'll throw it open for some questions. If anyone has any questions, please do raise your hand and we'll have Raj and Daniela answer them. Any questions for Raj or Daniela around this use case? No? Fair enough. I'll ask a question about the future. What's next?
Exciting stuff.
What's next?
Exciting stuff. We're very excited about what the future could be, because we've already had visions of not just answering questions and processing things because customers contact us, whatever channel they come into. They call in, but outbound. We have a vision for helping customers send that reminder through their phone. They use their phone. Reminders of, go to your doctor. Did you do this? Or, do you need to make a payment? Things that will avoid the customer having to even call in, right? Because we help them, more proactively. We do have a lot of use cases in our mind as we continue to grow. How many folks are working on this team? There's a lot of things. Our retail side has a lot of great ideas to help their sales agents. There's just so much. I can't, I don't want to tell all the secrets of what we're going to do, but we are excited about how more we're going to expand on the work that we've done so far.
Yeah, Daniela she's expressing what I hear from a lot of customers. So once they try it, they get some benefit out of it, they see the light at the end of the tunnel, push, the number of ideas just go through the roof, essentially. So we're seeing that in many of our customers after their first implementation, the roadmap just goes through the roof in terms of, and it goes across the organization. It's not just customer facing. When we have a customer in Germany, And we were surprised that like this was the use case. It's a large industrial customer, one of the most recognized brands in the world, in the industrial world. And they wanted to start with a procurement use case.
Interesting.
And I was surprised. And they explained to us that somebody wants to procure something from within the company, and then it goes to the procurement division. They then send request bids from their suppliers, and the suppliers then bid, and then it goes to the person trying to procure, and he evaluates, and then he picks, a vendor, and then it goes back to procurement. The time it took to actually the start of that process to the end was so long that by the end, many of those requests for procurement were no longer required. So they terminated the request. So they wanted to build a bot that went three-way. So you have three participants in the bot: the person requesting it, the procurement person, and all the suppliers, essentially. And they built that out. They've now launched it in about 7 or 8 countries in different languages. And now they're working with us to build a procure assist solution, basically, to be able to roll it out in like 40-odd countries in different languages. Wow. So you're seeing these use cases come out of nowhere where there's real value. And another company in Switzerland saw this and want to deploy the same thing, basically, for their use cases, slightly different, but same value statement, essentially. Mm. So you see now use cases that are customer-facing before the sale. Like we were just talking to a customer, but they're interested in pre-sales. They want a sales assistant to sit on their website, and watch what the customer is doing, and be able to start recommending things, configuring products, providing proactively pricing on products, information on products, and then be able to then help the same customer post-sale. But that customer also wants to use this for procurement. There are use cases in legal. Somebody needs an NDA, and they don't want to wait for 3 days for the legal department to send them an NDA that they can share with the vendor, essentially. They're deploying a virtual assistant, basically. There are HR use cases, obviously. There are both in recruiting and general HR. So you have use cases all over the enterprise now.
Mm. And those internal ones are pretty interesting, aren't they? Because they can be used to help get support internally for further development of external facing things. If HR and IT and all of these internal teams are using conversational AI, it helps kind of get them more comfortable and perhaps reduce some of the perceived risk around automating some of the more higher ticket kind of items and things like that.
I think the one concept I think is most important. While customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction is important, from a business standpoint, it's the speed of business. Mm. Basically, if I can get things done now, and I don't have to wait for 2 days, I move things faster. So revenue comes in faster, basically, and profits come in faster. And that's what conversational AI ultimately does. It makes it easy for people to get things done, basically, rather than learning an application and getting used to an application and then using it, basically, and that is what the real benefit is at the end of the day.
Interesting. So what does your team look like now then? Is it, because now that you're doing more of the kind of management yourself, have you got kind of like a core team that's dedicated purely on this? Is it kind of part of other people's jobs and people kind of chip in?
We have agile teams. We've established that this one team that has been together to start this is going to stay together, which is the most important thing, because we've now proved the value and there's going to be a lot more work ahead. And because we are now well-versed in how to use the application to our benefit, they're working more efficiently, they're training others, we're going to grow other agile teams to continue to grow what we want to do. So the teams are going to grow. I mean, it's exciting. We are very excited about what the future holds, but we definitely have started something that has gotten a lot of attention within the organization. I know that there's a lot of interest from other companies hearing what others are doing, and it's fantastic. I think and today, this conference here, and we're excited about a lot of the synthetic voices and how much faster you can make changes, and we can just see it evolve even further as we combine all these different technologies to improve the product that we are putting out there.
Absolutely. And you know, having the technology is fantastic, and it's really nice to see that there is good technology out there, and the synthetic voices are getting better, and all this kind of stuff's getting better, but all of it means nothing unless it's actually being used. And so what's been exciting so far today from the sessions we've had and hearing you both speak about this is that this technology is not being used for kind of like low value, kind of like scratching the surface kind of stuff. You've threw yourself into the deep end, you're automating a real core business transaction, you're delivering delightful customer experience, and you're putting the technology to the test in production with high volume. So it's absolutely fantastic, yeah. Thank you both for joining us, appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Awesome.